All right, let's set the scene. January 15th, 1947, Los Angeles. Imagine this. A young mother, she's out walking with her child just through a vacant lot in Leimert Park.
Right.
And what they stumble upon, oh, well, it's something truly ghastly, deeply disturbing, and really intentionally so. It would basically haunt the city for decades.
Yeah, we're talking about the remains of a young woman, but the state they were found in, meticulously posed,
Yeah.
bisected.
It's hard to even get your head around, honestly. The descriptions are just brutal.
And what really jumps out when you look at the details from the sources is how, well, performative it all seemed. The crime itself.
Performative? How so?
Well, the body was severed very cleanly,
right
at the waist,
Yeah.
and drained of blood, but significantly not at that location.
So killed somewhere else.
Exactly. Killed elsewhere, then the body was moved, the two halves were arranged, a little distance apart. And then there was the horrific facial mutilation, that so-called Glasgow smile. It just wasn't. It wasn't just a murder. It really felt like someone trying to make a statement, a horrifying one.
And the victim wasn't just some unknown person. They identified her pretty quickly, didn't they?
Yes. She was identified as Elizabeth Short, just 22 years old.
22. And think about the time, the 1940s. She was one of countless young people drawn to L.A., to Hollywood,
Yeah.
chasing that dream,
Yeah.
making it big on the silver screen, that whole classic American narrative.
Yeah, and if you think about L.A. back then, post-war Los Angeles, it helps paint a picture. Hollywood was this huge engine, right, pumping out fantasy, aspiration,
Drawing people in.
totally drawing in so many young people looking for their big break. And the sources suggest Elizabeth was definitely trying to get into those circles. She was moving between different jobs, always hoping for that chance encounter, that lucky break.
Which speaks to maybe a certain vulnerability.
Yeah.
Being out there trying to make it.
Perhaps, yeah. Navigating that world wasn't easy, and her dream just ended so violently.
And here we are, over 7 decades later? And that name, the Black Dahlia, it still gives you chills.
It really is.
The murder of Elizabeth Short, it's still, without a doubt, one of LA's most infamous, most notorious unsolved crimes. And that's really what we want to dive into today. Looking at the key pieces of this mystery, based on, the information available, why does this case still fascinate people so much?
And that's the big question, isn't it, for everyone listening, to think about, what is it about this specific tragedy? Why is it so stuck in the public consciousness?
Right.
Is it just the sheer horror of how she was found? Or is it something about Hollywood, that allure, but also the disillusionment?
Or maybe just the frustration, all that attention, all that investigation, and nothing definitive.
Exactly. A case that just generated so much noise, but ultimately no solid answers.
Okay, so here's the plan for this deep dive. We'll start right at the beginning with that awful discovery in Leimert Park. Then we'll talk a bit about Elizabeth Short herself, her life, her background, those Hollywood dreams we mentioned.
Get a sense of who she was.
Exactly. Then the investigation itself, which, reading the sources, sounds like it was just chaotic from the start. Pressure, maybe some missteps.
A perfect storm, perhaps.
Yeah. And we absolutely have to talk about the media, the frenzy that just erupted around this case.
Oh, definitely. You can't discuss the Black Dahlia without talking about the press coverage.
We'll also touch on some of the key figures, the persons of interest who came up over the years. And then finally, just consider the lasting impact, the legacy of it all.
Sounds good. So back to that vacant lot, the details we have really do highlight how calculated it seems.
Calculate is a good word.
The fact that there wasn't much blood there, that strongly suggests she was killed somewhere else. Her body cleaned, then transported, then deliberately carefully posed.
It implies a chilling level of planning, doesn't it? Control. Maybe even, like you said, a desire to create the specific, shocking image.
It's a deeply unsettling thought, the mindset behind that.
And almost immediately, as the news broke, that nickname emerged, the Black Dahlia. It's kind of this dark play on, what was it, the Blue Dahlia, a popular movie from just the year before.
Yes, exactly. And the press just ran with it.
Instantly.
The speed that nickname took hold is really telling. It immediately framed Elizabeth Short in this specific way, didn't it? Almost like a character.
Like something out of film noir.
Yeah, a tragic figure in some dark Hollywood story. And our sources point out this branding, this sensationalism, it started almost right away. It shaped how people saw her from the get-go.
Meanwhile, the LAPD, they launched this massive investigation, one of the biggest the city had ever seen, apparently.
Huge.
But reading the accounts, it just sounds like they were completely swamped almost immediately.
Well, think about the pressure. The public was demanding answers. The press was just relentless, breathing down their necks. The sources mentioned, hundreds of leads pouring in, over 150 suspects interviewed eventually, and just this flood of tips, many unreliable, even false confessions.
False confessions, too.
Oh, yeah. That kind of environment, that sheer volume of noise, it can absolutely overwhelm an investigation. Makes it incredibly hard to sort the real leads from the distractions.
And speaking of leads or potential suspects, one name always seems to come up prominently, Dr. George Hodel.
The Hodel theory.
And what's particularly unsettling about that is that the accusation comes from his own son, Steve Hodel, who was himself a former LAPD detective.
Right. Steve Hodel has been very public, accusing his father. And he's presented, some quite disturbing circumstantial evidence, things from his father's journals, connections.
It's definitely one of the most prominent theories, isn't it? It's gained a lot of traction over the years.
It has. And the idea, of this well-connected doctor, maybe with dark secrets, it fits certain crime narratives, certain tropes we recognize. But, and this is really crucial, and our sources emphasize this, despite how compelling some of that circumstantial evidence might seem, there's no definitive, concrete proof linking Dr. Hodel to the murder.
So it's a strong theory, but still a theory, not proven fact.
Exactly. It hasn't crossed that critical threshold into conclusive evidence.
And Hodel wasn't the only person they looked at closely, right? There were others.
Oh, absolutely. There was Mark Hansen. He was the nightclub owner. Elizabeth had apparently stayed with him for a while.
Okay.
And there were several other men she dated or been involved with. The police definitely had a pretty long list of people to check out.
But ultimately, none of those leads went anywhere solid. No arrests, no convictions.
No. And a major problem for the original investigation, as the source pointed out, was just a stark lack of hard physical evidence. Nothing directly tying any specific person to the crime scene or the act itself.
That lack of physical evidence plus all the media chaos?
It created an incredibly difficult situation for just methodical police work. You could really see how the sheer public nature of the case, the intense spotlight, might have actually gotten in the way of the investigation making progress.
Yeah, let's dig into that press coverage a bit more, because the sources, they really don't paint a flattering picture of the media back then.
No, they don't.
There are stories about newspapers doing things we'd consider just completely unethical today. Like, apparently contacting Elizabeth's mother, her grieving mother, under false pretenses just to get information.
It's shocking. It really shows maybe a darker side of journalism in that era. The competition was so fierce, right? For scoops, for sensational headlines.
So ethics kind of went out the window for some.
It seems that way in some cases. A blatant disregard for the impact on the people involved, especially the victim's family. The sources are right to highlight how that relentless chase for the sensational angle probably warped the public's view of Elizabeth Short and maybe even compromised the investigation itself.
Absolutely. And that nickname, the Black Dahlia, while it's undeniably catchy, dramatic, it also kind of dehumanized her, didn't it?
I think so, yes. It turns her into this character, this symbol, part of this lurid tale. And that can easily overshadow the reality.
It was.
Which was, as the sources remind us, that she was a real person. Elizabeth Short. A young woman with hopes, vulnerabilities, just trying to figure things out in a city that was famous for chewing people up as much as it was for making dreams come true.
Yeah. The focus on the nickname and the gruesome details often pushed her actual humanity, her dreams, into the background.
Precisely.
So, okay, let's fast forward. We're now, over 75 years later, and the murder is still officially unsolved.
Let's go cold.
Our sources mention that, yes, modern forensic techniques have been tried on some evidence that was preserved over the years, but sadly, no major breakthroughs from that.
Right.
And adding another layer of difficulty, it seems the original case file. Well, depending on who you ask, it's either lost or maybe even destroyed.
Yeah, the passage of time alone makes solving a case like this incredibly difficult. Witnesses pass away, memories fade, they become unreliable.
Evidence degrades.
Evidence degrades, exactly. And the potential loss of the actual original case file, that's a huge blow. It really hampers any chance of a thorough re-examination down the line.
And yet, despite all that, despite the decades, the lack of answers.
Hmm.
The story of the Black Dahlia just keeps going. It keeps captivating people.
It really does.
It's become this recurring theme in pop culture. You see it in books. James Ellroy's The Black Dahlia is probably the most famous example.
An iconic novel.
And movies, countless documentaries. It's clear this case still has this powerful hold on us.
I think the enduring appeal is multifaceted. It taps into several things, right?
Yeah.
Our fascination with the morbid, maybe.
Yeah.
The allure of any unsolved mystery is always strong.
True.
And then there's the whole context exploring the dark side that can hide behind a glamorous facade like Hollywood. It also kind of acts as this blank slate. People can project all sorts of theories and interpretations onto it, which in a strange way keeps the mystery alive and churning.
So as we sort of wrap up this deep dive, let's just quickly recap the main threads here.
Okay.
We have this incredibly brutal, bizarre crime. The discovery of Elizabeth Short's body, bisected, mutilated, posed.
Horrific.
Despite a massive police investigation, heavily publicized, no one was ever definitively charged or convicted.
No justice served.
The media played a huge role, and often a problematic, ethically questionable role, in shaping how everyone saw the case, and maybe even interfering with the investigation.
Definitely shaped the narrative.
And even though several people were looked at very closely over the years, Dr. George Hodel, Mark Hansen, others, there's never been that smoking gun, that conclusive evidence to close the book.
Always leads, never answers.
And it's just so important, isn't it, to remember Elizabeth Short herself? Beyond the sensational nickname, beyond the crime file.
Absolutely vital. She was a young woman. She had hopes. She had dreams, drawn to that promise of Hollywood like so many others. And she met this terrible, violent end. The fact that there's still no justice in her case is, well, it's deeply unsettling. It's a core part of its legacy.
And that constant echo in popular culture, the books, the films,
Yeah,
it ensures the Black Dahlia stays right there in our collective awareness.
it does. And that ongoing fascination, while it keeps her name from being forgotten, it also maybe risks burying the real person, the real tragedy, under more layers of fiction and speculation.
It's a tricky balance.
It is, between remembrance and perhaps distortion.
So a final thought then for everyone listening, as you consider everything we've talked about. Why this case? Out of all the unsolved murders throughout history, why does the Black Dahlia story still grab us so powerfully more than 7 decades on? Is it purely the shocking brutality, the bizarre staging of the